When we spoke to Tony Musket after the game, he was obviously disappointed, but he seemed to be okay physically. Did he make it through the game in
He
decent
did.
shape?
No, he was good. Met with him this morning and had a good talk. And first of all, glad you bring him up. Just really proud of him. You're talking about a guy that shoulder injury, pretty serious, but he battled through. And man, I thought he ran the ball hard. First half, man, I thought he was pretty sharp throwing the ball. He's a competitor. He's a guy that needs to win, and so he made it through healthy and looked good in practice yesterday. So I'm excited about going forward with him.
Going into the year, Anthony Calandria was a guy we didn't think we would see a ton of. Obviously,
Right.
the injury changed that. What did he get out of this experience, and how much more developed is he for it?
Yeah, so he's learning a lot of lessons and gaining a lot of experience. First he's got game experience in some competitive situations, and that's always tough when you have a young quarterback. If you have a sitting guy, and let's say you got a young quarterback, when do you find time? And a lot of times it's in late in the game, and but he's been in there in the fight in some big time games, starting games. So he's gained experience as a starter. He's gained experience in the fourth quarter. So he's gained experience just leading an offense as the guy. And then also now too, he's gained experience of learning how to also be a guy that prepares as a starter, not knowing if he's going to start the game or not.
And obviously, you thought he was a pretty good player since you recruited him, but until you get a guy into a game, coach him, call plays that work, call plays that don't work, how much of a better sense do you have of what you've got with him in the future now that you've had that experience?
Yeah, I think in particular with him, what you saw is whenever we were in the stadium, whenever like the spring game, any of those like game simulated situations, that man, he kind of showed up a little bit different. And then obviously that's an area, going back to your previous question, where he's gaining experience is being able to do it consistently in practice and not just when the lights come on. But you don't know until you get them. You're projecting on every one of these young men that you sign. You see qualities and characteristics that you really like, but you don't know until you get them in that situation. So I think we feel good about what we have in him, and I'm also excited about Tony having an opportunity to get out there and lead. So prior to this past game, he played 45 snaps in that first game. So really, he doesn't have a huge body of work, but based off of what I saw the other night, and then seeing how he's responded to some of the areas where he can improve, I'm really excited about his future as well. And so the competition is going to make them both better. That's the beauty of having guys that can compete at a high level at the same position. You got to manage the situation just like you do at any other position. But just so far, based off of what we thought, we feel good about what we got. Now that we've seen a little bit of Tony's work, and then we also seen the sample size that's encouraging with Anthony.
Yeah, you were just tapping on this, but how much of Saturday was a confidence builder in Tony, just in his health and in his ability?
Yeah, I think it was, and I don't know as much for him because for him to go out and play that way just tells me that that's who he is. But as coaches, I was over there like a couple times, like, okay, I know the what you're dealing with your shoulder, and man, he didn't run like he had any issues with his shoulder. He didn't throw like he had any issues with his shoulder. So. Excited that he was able to come out, especially in the first half. And then also, too, you got to take the good with the bad. It's an opportunity for all of us as a program, but him in particular, to learn from some things we could have done better in the second half to get us over that hump, to be able to experience what these guys are so desperate to experience, and that's that joy in the locker room after a victory.
Of course, going into William & Mary with 0-5, I know some guys are probably feeling desperate for a win, but how do you make sure they head into this game, not with like a do or die mentality, just kind of looking at it as just another game?
Great question. And so, from day one, I've said that every game is the biggest game of the season. And as I told the guys yesterday, whether you win or lose, you got 24 hours on Sunday to kind of enjoy it or kind of, you know, sulk in self-pity. But then when Monday comes, you got to lock back in and you got to focus on the next opponent because that is the biggest game of the season. So for us, it's a 1-0 mentality. We're just focusing on correcting the things that we can correct. You know, as we look at the game, you know, got to credit Halfley and BC for doing a great job, especially in the second half. They came out and they took it, right? But we got to focus on what we can control, and if we control the things we can control, you know, we're going to be in good position. And so we can't start pressing, right? Because part of, you know, what you saw in the second half, especially for us offensively, was guys were pressing. They were trying to do a little bit too much, trying to do more than their job. And when you do that, you lose your fundamentals, you lose your technique, and in essence, you feel like you're getting your job done, but you're really not getting your job done because you're pressing too hard and you're playing outside the control. So the message is going to be consistent. This is the biggest game of the season. Go 1-0, focus on what we can control. And if we do that, then and focus play after play after play after play, which is a really, really difficult thing in the game of football, play after play, falling in love with the mundane, the scoreboard will take care of itself.
After the game, you were still seeing what the evaluation will be on Dre Walker and also Malcolm Green. What's the timeline for those guys to be back?
So you know, don't have a timeline yet on Dre. Had an MRI last night, so we're waiting on those results. But definitely wouldn't be available this week. And obviously, with Malcolm's injury, you know, he's in protocol. So that's, you know, I don't even try to project on that. I just wait on him to heal and get back to where he needs to be, and then pass all his testing, and then the medical folks say that he's good to go. But neither one of those guys will be available this week. Some of the other guys, you know, Lex was back in practice, so we'll see, you know, where he is. Still obviously dealing with the foot, so you know that's kind of a day-to-day deal. Aaron and Jaw, I anticipate they got, you know, nicked up a little bit and probably take a day or so to kind of get back to full speed, but I anticipate that they'll be ready to go on Saturday. Smiley should be back ready to go on Saturday. You know, Xavier Brown is now at a point where he's back in full practice, so he could be a guy that's available and ready to go. You know, Mike Hollins will be day-to-day. You know, he was with his ankle after the game. I think those are the majority of the guys in where they stand.
And when you look at that secondary, especially that corner position, I know this is not where you want to be as far as depth, but how comfortable are the guys that are in there and available for you now?
Next man up, you know, and they got to go. And so one thing is we can't make any excuses, you know, but Will Simpkins is a guy that I was and still am, but I haven't had a chance to see. I was excited about him, and I think he's got a ton of ability. This will be a great opportunity for him to kind of seize the opportunity to get more reps. Elijah Gaines is a guy that's got versatility, so we'll move him back to corner to give us some more depth there, and then, you know, try to figure out with these two young corners that we have if either one of them is close enough to being ready to where we can put them in the game and gain some experience. So, you know, going into this week, you got Cohen, you got Sam, guys that have played a lot of football, and then you got Elijah's played some football, and then you got Simpkins, who will be a young guy out there, even though he's been with us for a couple years.
When you've been offensive coordinator, I think you've generally had really good offensive lines, so I don't know how much experience you have with that, but can you scheme your way to success when the blockers are struggling, or do you have to have kind of a level of performance from that group?
Oh, I think at any position you have to have a level of performance, and so that's one thing that we talk about on Mondays. You know, my job is to evaluate everything, myself included, and all the coaches and players, and so we have a standard of performance. So every position has a winning grade, and that grade is going to be comprised of different components. A lot of it is technique, execution, assignment, effort, you know, things of that nature. But you got to have a certain level of performance, a winning performance at every position. And then as coaches, you know, our job is to make sure that we put them in position, right, schematically. And when I look at the film, you know, we did have some more free hitters, right? But it was more a function of not guys knowing what to do. It's just doing it the way that, you know, your technique requires you to do. And some of that is pressing. Guys just being too eager, right, and abandoning their technique and then not performing. And so obviously those guys are going to get scrutinized the most. Anytime you're not moving the ball, more times than not, you're going to blame it on the OL, and it's not always their fault. When you talk about protections, sometimes it's the quarterback's job to get the ball out because we are releasing 5 guys into the route, which means that we got 5 guys in protection, and typically you have a 6-man box, so any kind of pressure, you're hot. So it's not always the OL, but in my experience, it's a combination of putting them in the right position, but then also when you put them in position, they got to win their one-on-one matchup. And that's where, in this game where I felt like, we fell short is when we got to our one-on-one matchups. Man, we were trying so hard, too hard, pressing, being too eager, that we abandoned our technique. And if you don't bring your technique into a one-on-one battle, unless you're just superior, right, in skill, in size, in speed, but when you're evenly matched, it's going to be the guy that plays with the proper technique. And so that's where we got to get better up front, and just being around those guys yesterday and seeing their body language and kind of the countenance on their face, man, they want to perform, they want to do better, and they're eager for us as coaches, and that's where we gotta improve. Just as I evaluate the things that I got to do better in the game, since we're talking about the players, I got to do better in the 4th down. I took a chance on a decline in the penalty in that situation, and thinking that he was going to kick the long field goal, and luckily we got the interception. So I got to do a better job in the 4th down situations. Communications with substitutions on special teams, we got to do a better job as coaches. We got to do a better job of helping them with their fundamentals and figuring out ways to reach and teach each player, so that when they do get into a pressure situation, they can trust their technique and not abandon it and just try to get by and survive. We need to thrive, and that's where we got to get better as coaches as well.
I think dating back to last year, it's 6 losses by 3 points or less. Is there a commonality in those games that you found as you kind of look back at how close you guys have been?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a commonality other than, and this is kind of insight into what we're going to talk about today as a team when I meet with them at 1 o'clock here, is, man, we got to have the courage to go take it. Right, man, you gotta not shy away from it and expect somebody else to make the play, man. You gotta have the courage to go and take it, because we're right there on the doorstep, man. But we gotta have the courage to step into the room, all right? And we can't wait on somebody else to invite us in, or we can't wait on the other team to make a mistake and give us the game. Man, we have to go take it, and that's a mindset. And as I look at where we are as a program, I think the guys have really identified with trying to get off to a fast start. So you've seen the last couple of games, man, the guys have gotten off to a fast start. But we talk about the middle 8, and so there's been games where we've been really good in the middle 8, where we win the last 4 minutes of the second quarter and the first 4 minutes of the third quarter, right? And then this past week we won half of it, right? So the first half we won it, the second half we did it, and then we kind of started shooting ourselves in the foot. Offensively, short drives, couldn't convert. Defensively, couldn't get off the field. And then now we're sitting here in the 4th quarter, and we're just kind of waiting on somebody to make a play. And part of making that play is just trusting in yourself, not abandoning your technique, and making the routine play. And I think some of the common things is we get to that point, and now we feel like we got to hit the home run. And you don't have to hit the home run, right? Just take the base hit, and then base hits over base hits will add up to a collective run, so to speak, if we're using baseball terminology. So I just think that we're growing in a lot of areas, and that mindset of just being able to go finish, like completely finish, but by doing it by focusing on yourself. That's an area where we got to get better, and hopefully enough hard lessons. As you point out, that many games by such a short margin. Hopefully, we'll get to the point where we're tired of those tough lessons, and we'll just say, you know what, we're not waiting on anybody else. We're going to take it, and that's the next step. And that's where I got to get better as a coach to figure out how to properly communicate that and instill that in the young men, so that when we're in those close games, man, we're trusting and believing that we're going to make the play to win the game, and not hoping that it just goes our way.
I was going to ask, do you have players in the locker room who you think can step up, will step up to make that step?
I do. Unfortunately, it's not always that person that's called upon to make the play, right? So it's all 11 have to have that mindset, because you don't know which 1/11th is going to be required to make the play. And so when you talk about football, right, and you talk about cohesion, you talk about chemistry, you talk about execution, what is it? It's 11 guys all doing their job at the same time. And you can go, I don't care where you go in the country, it's going to be very difficult to find, 100% of the time, all 11 guys doing exactly what they're supposed to do, how they're coached to do it. I mean, it's football. You're dealing with human beings, and nobody's perfect. But that's where you have guys. And unfortunately, maybe those guys aren't the one that's called on to make the play. And so that's what I got to do is get not just a few, but everybody believing and thinking that, hey, the play is coming my way. It's like you look at it, like you think about, like I think about Michael Jordan, right? I think about Kobe Bryant. Like they absolutely wanted the ball in the last second of the game. And not everybody's like that, but we play a sport where it's 11 of them out there. So we need to have a good majority of those guys with that mindset. And they want to. It's just now a function of, man, going in and living it and acting upon, that want and turning it into actual productivity. We talk a lot about it's not what you're capable of, but it's what you're willing to do. And so we got guys that are capable. Now we just got to go do it.
Do you know Mike, Coach London?
I do not.
At all?
No.
There was a time when two African-American head coaches going head-to-head was a big storyline. You've already had that with Locks this year. Has that changed in the profession? Is that no longer a big deal, or do you still think it's significant when you have these matchups?
And first of all, to have the opportunity to walk out to midfield and shake hands with any coach at this level, is a blessing and a privilege and a big deal. Because when you start, if you want to break out the Power Five, there's not many Power Five jobs, right? So to be in this position at any Power Five is extremely humbling, and it's a blessing. And so that's the first level of respect that I'm going to have whenever I go out to midfield. And then, I'm interested to be able to chat a little bit about his journey. Obviously I've been a fan from afar, and I've listened to him talk and speak, and always been extremely impressed with the way he presents himself. And obviously now we have something in common that I won't have in common with a lot of other coaches. He's coached at UVA. He's been here, so he knows the ins and outs of Charlottesville and the program and the university. And so just to kind of hear his perspective on some things and his journey, maybe something that can help me along the way. And there'll be a mutual respect. There's no question. Just one, for what I talked about, how hard it is to even be in a position to be a head coach at whether it's a Power 5, Group of 5, FCS, doesn't matter. And then we'll also, have a good understanding of some of the challenges, that may come with the position that we have.
Two of your three coordinators here are African-American coaches. Obviously, you're going to hire the best person for the job because of the pressure you guys are under. But is there a responsibility on your part to kind of help those coaches kind of come along and continue the progress there?
I think all of us coaches have a responsibility in the profession. I remember when I first joined the profession back in 2000, and I guess it would have been 2006. Times were different. There was that mutual respect, that responsibility for older coaches to help younger coaches. And then over time, things have changed. I think there's a lot of older coaches that still, want that mindset, but I don't know if as many of the younger coaches, really are as receptive, right? Because progression in the industry has changed, right? And guys are getting opportunities, a lot quicker and earlier than per se, 15 years ago. And so it's kind of changed the dynamic. So I think that. And I kind of lean towards, the old school of feeling responsible for helping younger coaches. So for me, the color of their skin, doesn't matter per se. I'm going to hire the individuals that I believe are best fitted for the job, best fitted for the environment that I'm trying to create, best fitted for the University of Virginia. But I do feel a responsibility to help younger coaches. And then I also feel a responsibility, right, to anybody that does, look like me, right, to be able to. And I think that should be with anybody, right? You should have that perspective to want to help anybody that's in your profession. And then obviously, let's look at your family, right? You're going to look at your family a little bit different than maybe you would a friend. You're still going to invest in that friend. But family's a little bit different, and so that's kind of the perspective that I say that I look at it. That I'm gonna try and help anybody and everybody in the profession, right? Because what I've learned as a coach is, we think we invent something and we want to kind of hoard it, but actually it's all recycled. I think, and I learned that from Robbie Caldwell. He was the O-line coach at my previous stop for a long time. We were together 11 years. And let me tell you something. He's forgotten more football than I know, all right, just because he's been around for 40-something years. And he taught me that a lot of it is recycled. So if it's recycled, then, man, we should share it. And because I think the game, needs to be protected. The game needs to be shared. And it makes the game better, and it makes us better as coaches.
Completely unrelated front, I do want to ask you again about 3rd and 1.
Yeah.
I know after NC State you told me the mindset is if we're a shotgun team and we do it best, that's what we should do on the biggest plays.
Heck, we tried it.
But is there a part of you that wishes you could get under center in this
Yeah,
game?
I mean, there is a part, and when we build the offense, we have a component, of that. And back when we were having that conversation, obviously the quarterback was Calandria, and somebody who doesn't quite have experience. You got a little bit more experienced guy, and we tried it. And so we said, hey, we're gonna, and we had it with Calandria, but a little more apt to call it with Tony, a little bit older guy. And man, we had it, and doggone it if we didn't line up off sides. A right guard is and you want to crowd the ball. You teach them to crowd the ball. You want to fundamentally give them the best chance to be successful. And we overcrowded the ball, and we missed it. And then in the course of the game, and Des and I talked about it. The 3rd and 1 where we handed it to Malik. Just trying to get it to the edge, hoping that we can get it to the edge. You're in the course of the game, and you're trying to establish the run game, and it seems like you're not getting. You're not getting them covered up. You're not getting the push that you want. And you see it a little bit more nowadays. People are, mixing it up. Going right at people and then handing the speed sweep. Probably, if you had the opportunity to do it over, you say, all right, let's just try and go right at them. As opposed to go east-west. But it's a function of you're in the game, and you got stuff that's working. You got stuff that's not working. And so that was another opportunity. But it also gives us a chance to challenge our guys. Like, in 3rd and 1 situations, that's a critical situation. That's where your attention to detail, your footwork, your hand placement, your communication, your pad level, all of it has to be in unison, working together. Or else, if 1/11 doesn't do the job, then you don't have a chance to convert. So 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, man, we're working on it. We're challenging our guys. Schematically, we're trying to figure out the best way to put them in position. But yeah, that's an area where we got to get better.
You talk about guys that are, like Kobe or MJ who want the ball in their hands at the end of the game. Tony seems like one of those guys, but when it doesn't go his way like it did on Saturday, how do you make sure he doesn't lose confidence in his ability to maybe later piece together a winning touchdown drive?
Oh yeah, I mean just keep working. And speaking of Kobe. Right, so I love to listen to just a lot of the little excerpts of Kobe, and Kobe says, I listened to the video earlier this morning, just trying to figure out what to share with the team, but he talked about, it doesn't matter if you have success or you have failure, right? You go right back to work, right? So in that case, yeah, we didn't get it done, but guess what? We're going to have a 2-minute drill in practice tomorrow that you have an opportunity to try and go win the game in practice, and that's how you build the confidence. It's like, man, you go right back at it. You don't stop, and you try to block out, any external distractions. And hey, there's going to be times that you're probably, truth be told, like Jordan says, you're going to miss more shots than you make. He's probably missed more game winners than he's made, right? But you got to keep shooting. You got to keep going after it. So I don't anticipate that Tony will lose any confidence. And we'll give him an opportunity this week in practice to lead one of those drives. Calandria will get a chance to lead one of those drives in practice. And then the next chance, hopefully you lean back on your training and you go be successful. But he knows exactly, what he could have done better in that situation. And so I don't anticipate any issues confidence-wise with Tony.
You talk about changing the mindset, not going for that home run. Some things are just ingrained in the player. So how do you go about changing that, that mindset culture? How hard is it to change someo's, thought process?
So first you got to build relationship. to where they trust you, and then you have to understand how they think, and then you got to put as many examples in front of them as possible, right, to confirm that it's okay to change or that you should change. And I think that's with anybody, right? If you just think about things that you have ingrained in you, like from your childhood, from the way your parents raised you, right? It takes a little bit of time for you to have exposure. Like, perfect example, and the reason I said this is because it came up the other night, right? We're eating dinner the night before, and usually you're going to have a lot of protein, so they typically have chicken and steak, and the conversation came up, and like, you know, I ate well-done steaks my whole life until like I learned that it was okay, you know, not to eat well-done steaks. And the player said the same thing, but I hadn't been exposed to anything other than a well-done steak, right? So it took like, all right, I'll try a little piece. And then I'm trying to convince myself in my mind that it's okay. And then over time, like as I tried it more, I changed my perspective. And now like, don't bring me a well-done steak, right? I'm medium well. All right. So now I got to work my way to medium, right? So it's kind of like that. So you have to expose them that it's okay, right, to possibly think a different way, right? And there's nothing wrong with the thought process necessarily that you have, but in order for you to take the next step, take the next progression, then there's a little bit of tweaking that you have, you know, in your mindset. And I gave him the example. What's the difference between a 250 batter and a 350 batter in Major League Baseball? And I asked him, I said, how many hits a week do you think that is? And they're like 4 or 5. It's 1.7. Right, 1.7 more hits a week, and you go from being an average baseball player to a Hall of Famer, right? So it's not much, but it's relationship, it's education, and then here's what we need. We need confirmation, right? I think when we get that confirmation, then more guys will be, you know, apt to say, okay, let's speed this thing up. So.
Try Brazilian Steakhouse next time.
Brazilian Steakhouse, yeah.
Steakhouse.
I not that one there. I've been there one time, and like, there's a lot of options, right? So I'm a picky eater, so there's a lot of options. But so actually, that's where me and Snoop, when I went on the visit, the home visit with Snoop, that's where we went. Yeah, so we had fun.
Des was saying that he would like to have more O linemen available sometimes. I think it was 2 weeks again. He only played the starting 5, I think. How comfortable are you guys with the O-line group as far as depth at that position? Are you comfortable at like 6, 7, or? Yeah,
so we played 7. So Hartsoe and Jimmy, Chris got in there a good little bit early, like third series, you know, threw those guys out there. One of the challenges as a coach, just being transparent, like, man, you sometimes get to a point like games on the line, things are tight, man, you're going to go with your guys, where you need to play some more guys, but it's really, really challenging and hard as a coach when you're in that moment. Like, you know, like, we need to play those guys. And so, you know, I feel good with those 7. I would like to get Blake Steen some more reps. I think he's come along, and we need to see what he can do in the game. So we're getting a little bit more comfortable, but one thing that I have to challenge the coaches is, man, we just got to play guys, right? We even though the situation, it's a 3-point game, every play matters. We got to play those guys. That's the only way that they're going to learn.
Will Bettridge missed that first field goal attempt against Tennessee. He's had a couple shaky makes, but that was a high pressure kick he made the other day, and he's made every kick since the Tennessee game. What has his development been like over this first half of the season? Yeah,
I'm proud of Will, and that's a position where like psyche is everything. They're a different, you know, type of football player in the way that they think and act. So you got to be careful in how you motivate them and challenge them, because it's just a different approach. But he's done a good job. He's getting better with some of the fundamentals. You know, one thing we got to work on is getting the kick up a little bit more. He likes to drive the ball, and there's situations where you have to drive the ball. On long kicks, you got to drive the ball, but on some of those short kicks, you know, we got to get it up and over, so that we don't put so much stress on the protection. But, you know, proud of him. He's working daily, and the biggest thing with him is confidence. And so, a little insight to him is he was a good baseball player as well, and his nickname was Walk-Off Will. So I'm trying to get him back to that confidence level where, like, and the reason he was walk-off Will because he had some walk-off home runs and hits in big-time baseball games. So I'm trying to get him to be walk-off Will in the kicking game as well. And he's progressing and slowly getting back to there. And, he's battled some tendonitis, in his knee, in his kicking leg. So that's another challenge for him.
Take our last two questions from Greg and Mike.
I just wanted to bring up Mike Hollins, caught the touchdown the other day, and I know you guys use him a lot in pass protection too. Where's he improved most as a football player? I know we've talked a lot about his story, but where's he improved most as a football player since last season?
Oh, great question. I think pass protection is the first thing that you say that he's really improved upon. It's been tough for all those backs to really get going, but he's had a couple of explosives, so he's doing a better job of finding the holes and keeping his feet on the ground. Had a tendency to get a little too high on some of his cuts, and that's the area where he's improved. And I think his overall understanding and knowledge of the game has improved, which gives him, gives us the most confidence on third down to be in there when you start getting exotic looks in different blitzes.
I have two, but they're related.
You good?
Cam Butler was your most disruptive pass
Yeah.
rusher. In losing him, and certainly Chico's getting healthy, but are you going to need more from the linebacker position in terms of John dialing up pressure that way, or do you think you can still get a lot with your front four?
Smiley coming back helps, and then hopefully Paul Akiri coming back will help as well. So we get a little bit more depth. Those guys can stay a little fresher. So when they're coming off the edge, they got a little bit more juice. Fundamentally, we got to do some things. We're going down the middle of blockers. We need to attack the half the man better. Our one-arm stabs, the placement of our hands got to be better, and I think that'll help. But Coach Rudd's done a good job. Since with the last couple of games, since I challenged him to get more pressure on the quarterback of having to use the linebackers, and so I think you got to use what's there. Hopefully, Chico, starts to kind of really feel healthy from both the shoulder and the knee, and kind of get back to where he was. But we're gonna have to do whatever it takes to try and get some pressure on the quarterback. That was one thing that was frustrating. Is, man, we gave up 5 sacks and we didn't get any. And now that quarterback that we were playing, we knew it was going to be tough. He wasn't going to let you get him in the backfield, but still we got to get to the quarterback. But we have been more disruptive. But we gotta continue to improve there. And then Cam Butler, it was exciting, man. And this is what I love about him. He's a committed guy. He loves the program. He loves the team. He was at practice yesterday. It's only about 3 days removed from surgery. And I'm sure he's still in some pain. And he was out there trying to help signal. So just extremely grateful for him. And hopefully, he can still bring that juice and that excitement and that energy, even though he may not actually step on the field.
And then last week you spoke a bunch about Cam Robinson's athleticism. Mm-hmm. He's a guy who can factor in there. How important will he be in that facet of the game? Yeah,
so him and all three of them can be disruptive. If you watch, you go back, and I believe it was James Jackson got the sack 2 weeks ago on Friday night. Cam Butler is a guy that, man, you watch him coming off the edge. He had Maryland's quarterback dead to rights. Didn't stay on the upfield shoulder, so learning opportunity there. But the one also too that I think gets overlooked is Ahern. Josh Ahern is a really, really good football player, and he's disruptive. And he's a guy as well that can get to the quarterback. And but the challenge there is you got to be able to hold up on the back end. So if you're going to bring pressure, you got to be able to hold up on the back end. So typically when you're bringing pressure, depending upon whether it's a zone fire, whether it's man coverage, you got to be able to hold up and you got to get home. And so that's where, we got to make sure that when we do dial up pressures that we got to get home and either force the quarterback to get rid of it, or we got to get him on the ground, because if not, you're asking the guys on the back end to cover a little bit longer in some more one-on-one situations.